The sky over the Arizona desert had been calm that morning, deceptively calm. The kind of stillness that old-timers warned meant something was coming. Caleb Morgan had been riding for 3 days, moving a small herd of cattle toward the trading post at Red Rock, when he first felt the change in the air. The wind shifted, dropping from a steady breeze to nothing at all, and the temperature plummeted in a way that made no sense for the season. He looked to the west and saw it, a wall of black clouds rolling across the desert floor like a tidal wave, swallowing the mountains, the mesas, the very light itself. He had seen desert storms before, but nothing like this. This was the kind of storm that buried men alive, that erased trails and memories, that left nothing behind but bones and silence. He turned his horse and rode hard, abandoning the herd to their own instincts as the first winds began to lash at his face. The cattle would survive, they always did, but he would not if he stayed out in the open. The storm was moving faster than any he had ever witnessed, the air growing thick with dust and debris, the temperature dropping so fast he could feel the cold seeping through his duster. His horse stumbled on the rocky ground, nearly throwing him, and in that moment of chaos, he saw it. A crack in the canyon wall, barely visible behind a curtain of desert brush. He pushed through the thorny branches, pulling his horse behind him, and found himself in a narrow passage carved by wind and water over centuries. Behind him, the storm roared like a living thing. The passage opened into a cavern, not a natural cave, but something that had been shaped by human hands, its walls smoothed, its floor cleared of debris. Torches flickered in iron brackets, casting dancing shadows across the stone, and in the center of that cavern, gathered around a small fire that somehow still burned despite the wind howling outside, were 10 Apache women. They rose as one when he entered, their hands moving toward the knives at their belts, their eyes fixed on him with a wariness that spoke of a hard life and harder lessons. Caleb raised his hands slowly, showing them he meant no harm. "Just a storm," he said, his voice rough from the dust and wind. "I mean, no trouble. I just need shelter until it passes." The women did not relax, but neither did they attack. They looked at one another, communicating in glances and small gestures that he could not interpret. The eldest among them, a woman with silver streaks in her black hair and a face that had seen more than 60 winters, stepped forward. "You are alone?" she asked, her English accented but clear. Caleb nodded, lowering his hands. "My herd scattered. I just need a corner to wait out the storm. I'll be gone by morning." The older woman studied him for a long moment, her eyes moving over his face, his hands, the way he stood. Then she gave a small nod, and the other women relaxed, though they did not return to their seats immediately. "The storm will last the night," she said. "You may stay, but you will follow our rules." Caleb led his horse to the far end of the cavern, where a natural hollow provided shelter for the animal. When he turned back, one of the younger women, a woman with sharp cheekbones and eyes that missed nothing, was standing beside a bowl of stew. She set it on a flat stone near the fire and gestured for him to sit. He ate slowly, feeling the warmth spread through his cold, stiffened limbs, watching the women as they moved about their tasks. They did not speak to him, but neither did they ignore him. They treated him not as a guest, but as something else, something he could not quite name. The eldest woman sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on his face as if she were waiting for something. He did not know what. The storm raged outside with a fury that shook the very walls of the cavern. Wind screamed through the narrow entrance like a wounded animal, and the sound of rain hammering against rock was deafening. But inside, the women moved with a calm that seemed almost supernatural. They sang sometimes soft, low songs that he did not understand, but that seemed to push back against the darkness outside. One of them brought him a blanket, and another refilled his bowl when it was empty. They asked him nothing, demanded nothing, and yet he felt their attention on him like a weight. He was not just a stranger seeking shelter. He was something else to them. He just did not know what. As the hours passed, Caleb began to notice things about the women that had not been immediately apparent. They were not simply traveling together. They were organized, disciplined, moving with a purpose that spoke of shared purpose and shared loss. There were no children among them, no men, no elders, except a silver-haired woman who seemed to be their leader. They carried themselves like warriors, but their hands were calloused from work, not warfare. He wanted to ask questions, but something in the silence told him that questions would not be welcome. Instead, he sat by the fire, watching the flames, listening to the storm, and waiting for the morning that seemed like it might never come. The eldest woman rose from her seat and crossed the cavern to stand beside him. "You see the markings," she said, pointing to the walls where faded symbols had been painted long ago. Caleb looked where she pointed, recognizing some of them Apache symbols, the kind he had seen on sacred sites across the territory. But others were unfamiliar, older perhaps, or from a tradition he did not know. "This place is old," he said. The woman nodded slowly. "Very old. My grandmother brought me here when I was a girl. She told me that this place was a sanctuary for our people when the world was young. She told me that one day, when the great storm came, a man would find this place. A man who was not one of us, but who would become one of us." Caleb felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "I'm not looking to become anything," he said carefully. "I'm just a cattle driver trying to get through the night." The woman smiled, and there was something in that smile that made him uneasy. "The storm does not bring everyone here," she said. "It brings only those who are meant to come." She gestured to the other women, who had stopped their tasks and were now watching him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. "We have been waiting, all of us, for someone to come." She looked at him and her voice dropped to a whisper. "You are the one. The prophecy said a man would come and he would protect us. He would lead us home. He would be our chief." Before Caleb could respond, the entrance to the cavern exploded inward. A section of rock gave way under the force of the storm, sending debris flying across the cavern floor. One of the younger women screamed as a sharp shard of stone caught her arm, sending blood spattering across the dust. Caleb moved without thinking, crossing the cavern in seconds and pulling the woman away from the entrance, using his own body to shield her from the wind and debris. The other women scrambled to reinforce the entrance, using saddles and blankets and anything else they could find to block the gap. When it was done, they stood panting in the sudden silence, and the young woman looked up at Caleb with eyes that held something new: respect, perhaps, or wonder. The eldest woman examined the wound on the young woman's arm, binding it with strips of cloth torn from her own clothing. When she was finished, she turned to Caleb, and her eyes were bright with something that looked almost like triumph. "You did not hesitate," she said. "You protected one of us without being asked, without waiting to see if there was something in it for you." Caleb shook his head, uncomfortable with the direction this was taking. Anyone would have done the same. The woman's smile widened. "No," she said softly. "They would not. We've been here for many months. We have seen others come to this place. They did not stay. They did not protect. They took what they wanted and left. You are different." The storm showed no signs of letting up as the night wore on. The women had settled into a rhythm now, their fear replaced by something that looked like anticipation. They gathered around the fire, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames, and the eldest woman began to speak in a language Caleb did not understand. Her voice was low and rhythmic, like water over stones, and as she spoke, the other women answered her in a chant that seemed to grow louder with each passing moment. Caleb sat apart from them, watching, listening, feeling the weight of something he could not name pressing down on him. He did not understand what was happening, but he knew, with a certainty that had no basis in reason, that something was about to change. The chant ended, and the eldest woman rose and walked toward him. In her hands, she held a simple leather cord, knotted and worn with age. the leather dark with the oils of many hands. "This was worn by the last chief of our people," she said, her voice carrying through the cavern. "He died defending our village from those who would destroy us. He had no son, no heir. The cord has been waiting for the one who would take his place." She stopped before him, and the other women rose and gathered around, forming a circle that enclosed them both. "You came to us in the storm," she said. "You protected one of us without being asked. You have the heart of a chief, even if you do not know it." Caleb stood, his heart pounding in his chest. "I can't be your chief," he said, his voice rough. "I don't know your language. I don't know your customs. I don't know anything about leading anyone. I'm just a cowboy who got caught in a storm." The eldest woman shook her head slowly. "A chief is not a man who knows everything. A chief is a man who does what is right when it is hard. A chief is a man who protects those who cannot protect themselves. A chief is a man who stands in the storm and does not run." She raised the cord above his head, and her voice, when she spoke, was like the voice of the desert itself. "Now you are our chief." She placed the cord around his neck, and the weight of it was heavier than anything he had ever worn. The other women came forward one by one, each placing a hand on his shoulder, speaking words he did not understand but somehow felt. When the last woman had stepped back, the eldest woman looked at him with tears in her eyes. "We have waited so long," she whispered. "So many nights of fear and hunger. And now, at last, we can go home." Caleb looked down at the cord around his neck, then at the faces of the 10 women who had placed their trust in a stranger. He did not feel like a chief. He felt like a man standing on the edge of something vast and unknown. But as he looked into their eyes, he saw something that made him stand a little straighter. He saw hope. The storm broke just before dawn. Caleb stood at the entrance of the cavern, watching the first light of morning paint the desert in shades of pink and gold. The world outside was transformed, washed clean by the rain, the air fresh and cool, the distant mountain sharp against the brightening sky. Behind him, the women were gathering their belongings, preparing to leave the place that had been their refuge for so long. The eldest woman came to stand beside him, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Where do we go?" Caleb asked finally. She pointed toward the east, where a thin thread of smoke rose against the sky. "Home," she said. "They think we are dead. They will not be expecting us. That is why we need you." Caleb looked at the smoke, then at the women behind him, then at the cord around his neck. He thought about the life he had been living, moving from town to town, belonging nowhere, answering to no one. It had been a safe life, a lonely life, a life that had asked nothing of him. Now, for the first time, something was asking. "What happened to your village?" he asked. The eldest woman's face darkened. "Soldiers came. They said our people had attacked a settlement. It was a lie, but they did not care. They burned our homes. They killed our men. They took our children. The 10 of us escaped. We have been hiding in this place ever since, waiting for the prophecy to be fulfilled." Caleb felt a cold anger settle in his chest. He had seen what soldiers did to villages, to families, to people who had done nothing but exist in a place someone else wanted. He had spent his life avoiding the kind of trouble that came with taking sides, with standing up, with refusing to look away. But standing here now, with 10 women looking at him like he was their only hope, he realized that looking away was no longer an option. "How many soldiers?" he asked. The eldest woman hesitated. "When we left, there were 20, maybe more, but they will not stay. They will take what they want and move on. Our people are scattered. If we do not gather them now, there will be nothing left to save." Caleb turned to face the women who had called him chief. They stood in a semicircle before him, their faces marked by loss and hardship, but their eyes bright with something that looked like faith. He thought about the storm that had driven him to this place, about the chance that had brought him to their door, about the moment he had moved without thinking to protect one of them. He had spent his life running from responsibility, from connection, from anything that might tie him down. But looking at them now, he realized that running had never made him free. It had only made him alone. "Then let's go home," he said. They left the cavern as the sun rose behind them. 10 women and the cowboy who had become their chief. They rode east, toward the smoke that rose from what was left of their village, toward whatever waited for them there. The women rode in silence, their faces set, their hands steady on the reins. Caleb rode at their head, the leather cord around his neck, the weight of their hope on his shoulders. He did not know what they would find when they reached the village. He did not know if the soldiers would still be there, or if the people they had lost could ever be found again. But as he looked at the women beside him, at their strength, their courage, their refusal to give up, he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer just a cowboy who had been caught in a storm. He was a chief now, and he would lead his people home, no matter what it cost him. The storm had passed, but something new had begun.